Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. All the ways to communicate with us right there at the bottom of your screen. You can email us. The address is thestory@kgw.com. You can also use the hashtag TheStory, on Twitter, or leave us a voicemail. Call our phone number, 503-226-5090. Well, it's been about a year since the city of Portland first announced plans to build 6 safe rest villages to address Portland's homeless crisis, at least in part. They were all originally supposed to open last year, but then that was delayed and delayed again. Finally today, the first site opened its doors. It's called Queer Affinity Village along Southwest Nato Parkway. It's right across the street from an elementary school, which has caused some controversy with a neighborhood group. Blair Best has our story.
This place has all the trees and it's more privacy, and it's a beautiful space.
The new Queer Affinity Safe Rest Village, a refuge for the LGBTQI+ community living on the streets.
Because when you feel comfortable is the most likely chance for you to succeed and access resources.
Jake Dornblazer and those at the Safe Rest Village project have been working on this low barrier site since the fall, but they've faced opposition from neighbors along the way.
Yeah, we don't always see eye to eye or agree about every single thing, but the important thing is everybody continues to come to the table. We continue to have conversations.
With having 600 children within 50 feet of a Safe Rest Village site, we want to make sure that the village is safe for the villagers as well as our students.
Bodo Heiliger runs the International School right across the street from the village. He's also part of the 2300 Southwest NATO Stakeholders Group, which has raised concerns about how close the village is to students. 2 days ago, the city said they'd negotiate, something we're told they haven't done for months.
We're cautiously optimistic. I think that's what we've been saying all along. We see a desire to collaborate now, and again, cautiously optimistic.
Commissioner Dan Ryan's office says in a statement, quote, "We respect the diverse neighborhood stakeholders, school leaders, and the communities they serve, and we appreciate their willingness to engage in difficult conversations to help build this village into a model of success."
So we definitely still have concerns.
The stakeholder group is asking for 3 things: background checks on the villagers, a no camping zone within 1,000 feet of the school, and an advisory board for each village. So far, that's the only one that's been approved.
The other 2 we're working through. We've gotten assurances and from the city that the villagers moving in have already been good neighbors.
Village staff will be on site 24/7, and caseworkers will help the villagers find permanent housing within 6 to 9 months of being there. Right now, the site has a wait list of about 30 people.
So the idea is that you make it really easy for people to be able to come through the door, and then you can assess them. It doesn't mean that they're not held to expectations in this space.
We talked with neighbors who didn't want to go on camera, and they said there's been a lack of communication from those leading the project. They feel left out of the process. However, their main concern isn't about what goes on inside the village, but that it will act as a magnet, attracting other people experiencing homelessness to move into that neighborhood when they see the resources being provided there.
Well, Blair, what about the announced Safe Rest Villages, the other ones in the other parts of town? Are they anywhere near opening?
Well, the city hopes to have more open by the end of this month, Pat. Here's a map of the planned villages. The city has built 30 sleeping units at the site of the old Sears building on Southwest Multnomah Boulevard. They're also putting in utilities like restrooms, showers, and laundry facilities. But the other village sites are still in the initial planning stages.
All right, Blair, I know there's a lot of strong emotions on all sides. Hopefully this works out for everyone. Thanks for your report. Portland City Commissioner Dan Ryan, who's in charge of all this, insists the Safe Rest Villages will all be open this year. And as for that pushback from people who don't want them in their neighborhoods, well, he says the conversation's ongoing. Laurel Porter asked him about that on this week's Straight Talk.
This commissioner is making sure that we resourced the safety plan, that we make sure that we have the right people at the table, including the police force, including the people from the street safety team, the impact reduction team, and most importantly, the school community leadership and also the leadership.
Well, Commissioner, they've been saying that make sure they don't feel like you're listening to them. Are you going to honor some of their requests?
Yeah, what I've learned in this process is that it can be a roller coaster in terms of when you're negotiating. So we're at a place now where we're back at the table. We're compromising, we're listening to one another. We've had great conversations just in the last 2 days, and I'm really thrilled that we have the right people at the table, including the leaders of the school community. So we're making progress for a safety plan that will be really supported by, that will be helpful to both the villagers and also for the school kids.
Ryan is running for re-election, and a poll out last December showed only about 10% of the voters said they would pick him again. His closest competitor is A.J. Mccreery. She's the founder and executive director of the nonprofit Equitable Giving Circle. But she made headlines of her own this week when the Willamette Week reported that she paid her 15-year-old son more than $3,000 from her publicly funded campaign. It's not a violation of campaign finance laws, but it did raise some questions. Laurel asked her about that on Straight Talk. She said, yes, she did pay her son.
He did my website. You can see it on the website that it says made by, managed by Hobbs Waters. He sends out all of my communication. He's done a ton of research. He's not the only youth that I hired on my campaign. I also hired Danny Cage, who is a known activist in town. I believe in paying people. I also believe in multi-generational work and collaborations. And so it was important both from the beginning to pay people as also to have young voices on this campaign. And so I absolutely hired my child. I absolutely hired another young person, and they've done incredible work. If I'd hired a firm to do my website in January, it was gonna take 4 to 6 weeks. My son was able to put a website up, and it's beautiful. It's very nice. And I'm not the only person that he's done a professional website for. He was able to do it in 4 days. I would say haters gonna hate, and I hired my overaccomplished, overachiever child. I don't feel bad about it, and I absolutely will continue to work with young people in this way.
You can watch the full interviews of both Ryan and Mccreery tonight on Straight Talk. That's at 7 o'clock. We're also following the race for Multnomah County Sheriff. Mike Benner spoke with the top 2 candidates there about what they would do to tackle the rise in gun violence in Portland.
Yeah, it's time to make that change.
Days ahead of the Oregon primary, candidate for Multnomah County Sheriff, Derek Peterson, alongside a lifelong friend, is out campaigning.
Derek for sheriff
and singing in the Hillsdale neighborhood.
It's great. It's fantastic to get out to meet the people.
It's all fun and games now, but if Peterson becomes Multnomah County Sheriff, the real work begins. And perhaps there's no bigger issue in our community than the gun violence epidemic.
It's mind-boggling, and it's sad because we had a place, kind of a utopian type of situation in Portland.
Peterson is deeply troubled by the more than 500 shootings in Portland to start the year. At least 34 people killed by that gunfire. And it wasn't any better last year. 69 people gunned down in more than 1,300 shootings. Peterson, who's currently a captain at the sheriff's office, says ending the violence will take a proactive approach involving the entire community.
We have to have all hands on deck right now and really address this issue with our community partners, our organizations out there, as well as all our law enforcement partners as well.
Overwhelmingly, people do not feel safe in our community.
Nicole Morrissey O'Donnell is running against Peterson. She too is concerned about gun violence, partly because she was introduced to it as a teenager.
My father was shot in the chest by a 15-year-old boy that was robbing his store. So I recognize and understand how that sense of safety and security can be ripped away from you.
As current undersheriff in Multnomah County, Morrissey O'Donnell says she's addressed gun violence by adding an investigator to solely focus on it. She says she's even beefed up the gun dispossession team. And if elected sheriff,
I am dedicated to working alongside our community, working with our neighborhoods, working with our community-based partners to really find those avenues where we can connect with people, where we can really be able to understand what's happening in our communities.
Nicole Morrissey O'Donnell pledging to do what she can to end gun violence if she's elected. Derek Peterson promising to do the same if he gets the nod.
We're looking at an epidemic, an emergency type situation.
Mike Benner for KGW News.
Moving on now. Do you have any of these at home? These came pretty much in one day to my house. They've just been pouring in, and it made me wonder, do they really make a difference? To answer that question, I went to Amy Ruiz, the senior vice president for a political consulting firm called Strategies 360. She believes in and uses these flyers.
Are you a believer in all these flyers? And have you guys been these are the ones I
brought my own stack in. Yes. Yes. No, direct mail is very effective, especially in Oregon, which is a vote by mail state. We know that most voters in Oregon have a mailing address. So it's one way that we know we can reach the exact voter that we want to be talking to.
It is effective.
It is effective. It's more effective when it's part of a broader strategy. So there are many ways to reach voters. I'm sure folks are seeing digital advertising, seeing advertising on television, social media posts, sometimes radio, yard signs, people knocking on your door. If folks are not already getting text messages, they may soon start to get those. And of course, phone calls.
Companies like this one, Morel Inc. in Portland, have spent the last few weeks churning out lots of mailers for lots of campaigns in Oregon. The big push is over now, but the machines will be back at it in October for the November election. Nick Graham is vice president at another Portland area company that makes these flyers called Gateway Communications. He said it's more expensive to send out flyers in the mail than using social media, for example, but he believes it is worth it.
When you compare the cost per impression from, say, an email blast or social media, the cost per impression is going to be higher with direct mail. The quality of the impression is also going to be significantly higher. And so, when somebody scrolls through their social media, that there is an impression, but it's not like for like.
So, okay, that's why you're getting these things. And also, if you don't like them and you haven't voted, well, vote earlier next time, because then they'll stop coming right away. And some might consider this stuff junk mail, but there's actually a lot of thought that goes into each and every one of them.
And is there any rhyme or reason, like, to the colors? Are there different colors that get our attention?
Well, certainly you want to stand out in the mailbox and in that pile of mail. So you'll see campaigns use different sizes. We like to send things that are, at least 8.5 by 11, so they kind of stick out of the pile and don't hide behind that utility bill. And certainly you want to see colors. You want to see logos of organizations that voters know and trust.
So, what's your take on these campaign flyers? And yes, I know I'm holding them up a lot because they're colorful. Do you find them helpful? Are they just annoying? Send me an email and let me know. Also, if you're one of those folks who loves to collect them and then you use them when you vote, take a picture of yourself using them. Send us your picture with you by a stack. We may use it on the show Monday night. Our email is thestory@kgw.com, or you can also call and leave us your thoughts on our voicemail. That's 503-226-5090. While we're talking about campaigns and ads, let's pivot a moment to TV ads. A few of you have pointed out to us that some candidates are running TV ads without really saying anything about their party or the seat that they're running for. This ad from Mike Erickson, for example.
I'm Mike Erickson, running for Congress. I will fight hard for America's energy independence. I'm running for Congress, and I approve this message.
Well, I had a chance to ask our political expert, Lynn Bergstein, about that.
Do you have any thoughts you might offer about some of the candidates that aren't really saying exactly what they're running for? I'm thinking like Mike Erickson, Mike Erickson for Congress, but he doesn't say if he's a Democrat or Republican or what seat he's running for. What's up with that?
I think that's been a kind of a part of the vocabulary of candidates for a long time. Particularly if you're a Republican in Oregon, you don't want to kind of divulge that too soon until you're certainly, you've got the attention of voters who are likely to pick you. I mean, I see this not only in Oregon but all across the country. People don't say as much about what they're running for until they want to catch your attention, hopefully hook you, and then think of it as a name familiarity game.
So that's why you're seeing those ads and you're like, who is this person? What are they running for? By the way, Mike Erickson is a Republican and he's running for the newly created 6th congressional district seat along with a ton of other candidates. It'll be interesting to see how all this shakes out on Election Day, which you should know is this coming Tuesday in Oregon. It's the middle of May and this is what it looks like outside. Oh my gosh, pretty gloomy and not really all that spring-like. So what's driving all the cold weather and the constant rain so late in the season? We're going to ask our chief meteorologist, Matt Sofino, when the story continues. Night for our broadcast. I'm told that every once in a while there's been a green screen that's popped up. I just want you to know we're seeing it too. It's not your vision. We're working it out. If this bothers you, you could always watch us on our YouTube stream or on kgw.com, which is not being affected. But thanks for sticking with us. Keep sending your questions and comments to the story at kgw.com or give us a call and leave a voicemail at 503-226-5090. Well, is there anybody else who's waiting for spring, the warm part of spring to arrive? Sure has been cold and gloomy out there for mid-May. Let's bring in Chief Meteorologist Matt Sofino. Matt, what is causing this long stretch of cool weather, and are we ever going to see 70 degrees?
I tell you what, Pat, we've hit 70 a couple of times, but it's been very, very sporadic. And before I get into what's causing it, I want to dig into the numbers because they're really pretty impressive. So what I did is I looked at the numbers from April 1st until yesterday, May 12th. And the reason I chose that period is because we had some warm weather in late March, so I wanted to leave that out. And spring began, March 20th, so we're really going for most of spring so far. And here's what the number, and by the way, this graphic, I'll get back to this later in just a minute. But look at this. Our average high temperature from April 1st through yesterday, 58.9 degrees. Last year, same time period, nearly 10 degrees warmer, 67.8. That is a huge difference, and that holds for the low temperature and for the average temperature as well. This has been our coldest April 1st to May 12th in over 10 years. You got to go back to 2011, the last time we had a period like this that was colder than what we've been experiencing for the last 6 weeks. Okay, so those are the temperatures. Cold, we know that, and the numbers bear it out. What about the rainfall? Even more striking, as a matter of fact. Since the beginning of April, we've had 7.46 inches of rain. Last year, 0.46. So we've had 7 more inches of rain in the last 6 weeks compared to last year. And that 7.46, that is the wettest ever April 1st to May 12th period in the history of Portland, of record keeping in Portland. So incredibly impressive there with the rainfall. I mean, you got to remember, last year was extremely dry and extremely warm, but this year has been the opposite. So, to your question, what is causing this? Well, the answer goes to something we talk about quite a bit. We talked about it back in the fall, La Nina. And each La Nina is different from the next, and they change. They're dynamic. They're not static throughout the course of a fall and winter. And what happened this winter is La Nina got stronger in late winter. And I believe that's what's really driving our cool, wet spring. So let's look at that. Let me show you what La Nina looks like. Here's that graphic again, but we'll put this in motion. Here's Asia, here's the Pacific Ocean, Hawaii, here's North America, Portland right up here. This is looking at basically a cross-section of the equatorial Pacific Ocean. And you got to remember, La Nina and El Nino, either one, it's not just the ocean temperatures. We look at that to kind of define how strong it is or whether or not it even exists. But it's coupled to the atmosphere. It drives what happens in the atmosphere. And what we've seen through late winter and into early April was this big pool of much below average water, not only at the surface, but at depth, all the way down to, say, 600 feet. So that has been driving the weather pattern that has kept us cool and wet. It shifts all the warm water to the far western Pacific. That in turn changes where we get the thunderstorms and the moisture and the energy going into the atmosphere. That changes the orientation and positioning of the jet stream. So again, this is showing us how La Nina is. The other thing this is showing us is because there's all of this very much colder than average water way down at depth, that makes us think that La Nina is likely to continue, not only through spring and summer, but even into fall, which would be really unusual. Now, it could peter out and change, but right now the odds are stacked that La Nina will continue through summer and into fall, making this a three-peat La Nina, because we had La Nina last year, we have it this year. If we have it again this coming winter season, that would be 3 in a row. That's only happened twice since 1950. Highly unusual to get back-to-back-to-back La Ninas. And if we do, that means we can expect more cool and wet weather in the spring and the summer, and then especially into winter. Now, having said that, Pat, remember, last year was a La Nina. We were coming out of a La Nina in the spring, and we had our hottest weather ever in Portland, and not just by a little, by a lot, when we hit 116 degrees back in late June. So it doesn't mean that the whole rest of spring, all of summer will be cool and wet. There will be variations. We will get some warm and eventually hot weather this summer, but that's what's driving it, La Nina.
Wow. So now when folks say, what's up with the weather? Now we all know. Matt always knows, but now we know as well. Thanks for educating us, Matt.
Yeah, no problem, Pat.
If you're heading to the coast this weekend, it's also going to rain there. So if you want to stay inside, we're going to take you on a little tour of how Cannon Beach on the coast got its name when the story continues. It's Friday. Let's have some fun. It's time for another edition of What's in a Name, where we explore the fun stories of how a place came to be named. This week, we're going to look at the quaint little town on the coast recognized for Haystack Rock. It's more than what it's named for. Well, you know what I mean. Here's Devin Haskins in Cannon Beach.
Surrounded by sandy beaches and mountains, it's a popular spot because of its natural beauty. Cannon Beach may be known more for the beach than it is for the cannon.
This place was first called Ecola,
which means whale in Chinook, and took on the name after Lewis and Clark came here. That name, though, would get a little confusing for the post office thanks to a community called Eola near Salem.
It took a lot of patience if you accidentally got a letter to Eola and Ecola and everything.
After the post office insisted it get changed, it went from Ecola to Cannon Beach. The beach part is pretty obvious. The name Cannon? Well, that dates back to 1846, and it starts with a shark. No, not the type you're thinking of, but an 86-foot-long ship from a fleet of sister ships
that were named the alligator, the dolphin, the porpoise, and the shark.
President Polk sent the shark here in the 1840s to find out the people's loyalties in the Oregon Territory. So after a stop at Fort Vancouver, the shark headed back out to sea. But not using the best judgment, Captain Lieutenant Neil Howison tried to cross the Columbia Bar alone.
And it did not go well for them.
Yeah, not at all. The shark ran aground and wrecked.
You know, looky-loos, curiosity takers, they definitely had their pickings, and then the rest was just the owners of the ship salvaging it.
One of the cannons on that ship washed ashore amongst some wreckage.
A local mail carrier found it, and he pulled it up into like Shark Creek area, and he left it there because he would come back for it, but the tides changed, you know, and so it was covered.
This is where a game of peekaboo comes in. Some years later, that cannon would be found again by someone else.
And he was planning on coming back out, and then it disappeared again.
Okay, so stay with me here. They found it, then they lost it, then they found it, and then they lost it again.
And this little peekaboo game with the cannon kept happening.
To be fair, that cannon did weigh about a ton and was in wet sand. It would be 50 years after the shark sunk before it was found again, this time for good. For years, that cannon sat alongside a highway getting vandalized and rusting away. It was sent to Texas A&M for restoration and now sits at the Cannon Beach History Center.
This is the cannon that Cannon Beach is named after.
And that's what's in a name.
For this week's Hey Help campaign, we're asking you to donate to Holla. They're a mentoring program based in East Portland that connects kids of color with role models who share their culture. If you want to donate, just hold your phone's camera up to the QR code there on your screen, or you can go to kgw.com/heyhelp. This fall, they're planning to open a public charter school in partnership with Reynolds School District. They have a flight school where young people can learn what it takes to be a pilot.
So we have story after story of, you know, kids do best when people show up their life and walk relationally with them in the trenches and are present day after day, week after week. And that's what our mentors do. They show up, they dream with kids, they sit with kids, they think with kids, and they provide those access for those kids to go take steps in their life. And so we have kids that are first in their college, in their families to go to college. We have other kids that jumped on a plane and now dreamed about getting their flight instructor's license so that they can be a pilot, and now they're soon to be a pilot. So we have story after story of that kind of success in our work.
Sounds like a great program. It's why we're proud to help them raise money. Here's that QR code again. This is a micro donation drive, so feel free to give any amount, no matter how small. And that's the end of our program. Thanks for watching. But remember, the story, our story, well, that never ends. I'll see you on Monday.
This is KGW News at 6:30.
We are